He should be good to go. Okay, it is now 1 o'clock exactly somewhere, and welcome you all to our second last council meeting of the term, Monday, August the 22nd, and I'll call this meeting to order. There were no addendums or corrections to the agenda. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Okay, next is the approval and adoption of the minutes. I'm going to separate out two of the minutes to do that separately. So I have a recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meetings held June 20th, June 20th, which one?
So, Marilyn, due to pecuniary interests identified in the April 19th and 25th minutes.
25th, okay.
I wish to refrain from voting on those minutes.
Okay, I got that. Thanks, Councillor McCrae. So let's split those out then. I have a recommendation that the minutes from Committee of the Whole from June 19th and June 25th be adopted as circulated. Mover for that, please. What did I say? Oh, June, okay.
April 19th, April 25 first.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. So Committee of the Whole, April the 19th and April the 25th be adopted as circulated. Councillor McElwain?
There is a small correction on the April 19th minutes.
Okay.
6.4 on page 3. It mentions gesturing while of
So our staff will confirm which Jeffrey. Wow, this is weird for a small town to have two people with the same name. Yeah, so we'll confirm that. So can I have a mover as amended? Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McElwain, or Councillor Van Leeuwen. All in favor? And that's carried. And now that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole, from the June 20th, May 30th, June 15th, and July 18th be adopted as circulated. Mover for that, Councillor McElwain, second by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor of that? And that is carried. Well, we got through that. On to presentations and announcements. We have the introduction of our artist, Céleste Compion. Is that how you say that? Is that right? Oh, Compion. You can come, and thank you so much for letting us see these excellent pieces of art. You can come to the podium and introduce them, please. Yes, right there. And just hit your, Marianne's going to help you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Mayor Linton and councillors and administrative staff, it's an incredible honor to be here. It happens to be the 25th anniversary of our arrival in Canada from South Africa. Yesterday we arrived in Toronto. Today we spent the day in Toronto taking our children up the CN Tower and riding on the subway and the trams. And tomorrow will be the arrival of our family in Elora. So it feels I'm really emotional about being here. I'm not going to be honest. I've actually never done anything like this before, so it's a first time. I've never been in a meeting of councillors before. And as a person who was raised in apartheid South Africa, I was very leery of even being involved with politics because it was a scary thing to do. And all of this is a celebration of our move to this country. So thank you. The reason that I'm here is because I am a totally rabid quilter. I've been a mom and a wife. I've been a high school teacher, both in South Africa and here in Canada. I taught at Centre Wellington. But in 2013, I retired from teaching and went back to my true passion, which is sewing and quilting. And I started importing a fabric from South Africa called shweshwe. And so all the pieces that you see here are made with this particular cotton fabric. It has an incredible history, which is all in the notes that are added to the agenda. So I'm not going to go into the detail of that. But I feel that the most important thing to me about being here is being able to express being a Canadian in a community like Elora, because all of what you see around you is a culmination of our family's move to this country's culture. And being able to be invited and share the little thing that I do in a community that actually takes it seriously and gives artists a space to express themselves in public is stupendous. And I think in your culture, you have so many of these things that maybe some of you don't even think about it anymore. And so that's what I want to do. I want to say thank you. You'll see pieces that I've made. What I do as an artist is quilting and also make clothing and things. I don't really make to sell to other people. Part of what I do is promoting this fabric from South Africa because it's from my roots, and also because it is a fabric that is employing South Africans. The fabric industry in many parts of the world does not exist as small business anymore. I know that Canada did have a fabric industry that was quite significant. Not so much anymore. That whole world has changed. But this particular company is a small company, trust-owned, and they are profit sharers, and they also give back to the community of South Africa quite significantly. And so I feel very proud to be importing this fabric and selling it not only in Canada, but across North America. And the way that I do that is to make items to teach people quilting, to do presentations about the fabric, mostly to quilters, because you don't know this, but you live in Quiltopia. This area around Elora was a part that I researched when our family was going to move. My husband didn't know I was doing this part. We had to move to a place where he could start a business, and that was west of Toronto. We couldn't afford to live in the GTA with the South African exchange rate, but we went 1 hour west of where the business area is, the production area is in Toronto. But I knew that there was quilting here, especially because of the Mennonite community, and I had done a whole list of research, but Elora and Guelph were at the top of our list. And we sort of thought, yeah, we'll go to Guelph because it's a city, it's a good thing. We saw Elora, totally fell in love, and we are so happy that we're here. We moved straight into our first home, never be called our own. It's Dr. Geddes' home. Everybody, not Dr. Geddes, Dr. O'Brien. We live in Dr. O'Brien's house, and we know this. Everybody's told us. So, long story short, it's an honor to be called an artist in the first place, because I've never called myself that before, but thanks to Beverly, who invited me to do this, I'm stepping up. And it is an honor to be part of your community and being able to thank the people who make the decisions to keep this community as special as it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celeste. And it's an honor for us to be able to showcase your skill and your passion. And thanks so much for those heartfelt words. And a few years after, officially welcome to Elora. And you did a good job choosing here over Guelph. Guelph's fine, it's just not Center Wellington. Thank you very much. 5.2, Mayor's County Council Report. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the delegations that we had at the Association for Municipalities of Ontario, because the county isn't meeting this month. So it was good. It was a good conference for sure. We had a number of delegations. We had one township delegation. We met with Minister of Energy Todd Smith, myself, Councillors Foster and Dunsmore, and CEO Wilson. Met with Minister Smith, and we were making a case for Center Wellington Hydro. Rather than on Hydro 1 should be permitted to service, that we should be permitted to service all our planned growth within Center Wellington, so that our new urban neighborhoods, our new business areas, including our 56-acre CW Business Park, should be able to be serviced by Center Wellington Hydro. We made the case that we have the capacity, we have the interest, and we really wanted the minister and the ministry to help with pushing ahead with making it easier and more convenient to expand Center Wellington Hydro across Center Wellington, because that makes sense for a whole host of reasons. So Minister appreciated our position, let us know that our next step should be have additional discussions with the Ontario Energy Board, who makes those decisions. So that's what we will do. On the county side, we met with Associate Minister of Housing Parsa, and we were talking about the Wellington County's Continuum of Care project. So this meeting was a follow-up to the one that we had in February at Queen's Park that was hosted by Speaker Arnott. And the purpose was to bring the new Associate Minister up to speed on this exciting project that's been designed for the county's Wellington Place campus, adjacent to and physically connected to Wellington Terrace. So the proposed Continuum of Care neighborhood is intended to provide a range of housing options for people 60 years and older, from independent living, independent retirement to assisted living options. So the County Council has approved the concept plan, but they're looking for financial support from both the province and the federal government to ensure that this project remains cost neutral to county taxpayers. So we had a good meeting with Associate Minister Parsa, and we received his commitment that he would speak to his cabinet colleagues to provide us with direction for next steps for that project. The county also met with Associate Minister of Health, Tabolo, and the purpose of that meeting was to support the mental health and addictions work that is being done by CMHA with Helen Fishburne, and make sure that the ministry was aware that the county 100% supports the proposal that they've already submitted to increase funding for mental health in the city of Guelph as well as the county of Wellington. And coming out of COVID, this is even a growing need in this area. And we had a really good meeting, and we're anticipating positive results from them going through the Canadian Mental Health Association of Waterloo Wellington's proposal, and hopefully we see some positive news in form of more funding for this really important issue. And then as a member of the Western Wardens Caucus, and that's an organization that represents 15 upper and single-tier municipalities in southwestern Ontario, represents more than 1.5 million residents, and the purpose of this caucus was to work together to influence federal and provincial legislation and programs. So at AMO, we had a multi-minister delegation that we had several ministers at the same meeting, a 45-minute meeting, which is pretty unheard of at AMO. So it included Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Steve Clerk. We had a really good meeting with the ministers, and we had 4 priorities that we wanted to bring to their attention. The first is the implementation of the Western Ontario Workforce Strategy, municipal representation on the Ontario Health Team's governance, provincial broadband, infrastructure investment through our SWIFT program, and then affordable and attainable housing in rural areas. So we've been building a really solid reputation and relationship with the Ontario government, and we anticipate having the opportunity to work with the government as a Western Wardens Caucus going off into the future. And so that was our delegations. It was a good conference. I had Councillor Dunsmore and Councillor Foster there as well. So we and our CEO was there and our clerk was there, and we got to see a lot of different seminars and make sure that we met with some really good people. So turning it over to councillors for their thoughts on their committees. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Center Wellington Seniors, ongoing activities at the Senior Center, post-pandemic, hopefully. There's a need, the seniors AGM is coming up this fall, and there is a need for seniors who might wish to serve on the board. And so if anyone is interested, reach out to the Senior Center. Don't really have a report on Center Wellington Hydro other than what you've offered, Mayor. Thank you very much.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yep. Actually, all of my committees this summer have taken the summer off, so we haven't met. And of course, you did discuss AMO, so nothing else to report.
Councillor McElwain?
We did have a Heritage Committee meeting this month, and there's a couple of demolitions that are coming forward later. And we also had a delegation on a designated property and sent back some comments from the Heritage Committee, so it'll be coming forward in the future.
Councillor Kitchers?
Thank you, Mayor. Safe Communities doesn't meet during the summer. Farm Safety is going to have a meeting on this Wednesday, first time in 2.5 years.
Councillor Van Loon?
Thanks. I have nothing new to report based on the holiday season.
Councillor McRae?
Yeah, I have nothing to report for this month. GRCA board meetings on Friday.
Okay, thanks, councillors. Moving on to item 7, consideration of reports. The first thing that we have is a decision report on 140. Oh, sorry, I missed something else. Delegations. Little thing like delegations. You'd think that the folks in the gallery would trigger me that we're missing something. All right, we have a number 6 delegations, and first we're going to have a delegation, Rob Stovel, on Sideroad 18. Invite you, Rob, to come to the podium. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Rob Stovel. I am, we own that property, and there's a zoning application that was put in. I'd like to thank the council and staff for having me here, and I want to say that staff has been most helpful working through the process. I've reviewed the report prepared by the Director of Planning, and I note that Mr. Salmon recommends approval of the application and that the zoning amendment be given 3 readings. I concur with the report and support the recommendations. Just wanted to say that this is what we thought would be checks the box for infill, and we're trying to do affordable and near affordable housing. That was the reason why we asked for the secondary apartment units, and it's so that young people can get a chance to get ownership. They can't, well, in the most part, they can't afford single-family homes in this area anymore. So what we're looking at is either semis or towns, and we just felt that semis would be more appropriate for the area. So that's where we came from, and I have my 2 lads with me here, Rob and Scott, and we're starting up our own family business, and we want to try to keep things local, and we work with local contractors, and it's a rental, it's supposed to be for rentals for young people growing up. So the secondary units would be 1 basement rooms. Those would be 1 bedroom rooms in the basement. Those would be for folks like Rob and Scott, and then the main floor and second floor units would be for 3 bedroom units for small families just starting out. So that's what we had proposed. That's the reason why we asked for the secondary apartments. And when I explained that to Mr. Salmon, I think he understood and worked his way through the reporting. I mean, we're being hit with all sorts of financial issues, you know, with inflation and raising interest rates. And this is the only way that I could think of that in keeping it local, without building apartments everywhere. This is the only way that I could think of that we could come up with something that was affordable and near affordable. So I'm hopeful that you'll approve the zoning amendment, and I'm here to address any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Any questions for clarification before we get to the report, which is the next item on our agenda? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Rob, for your report. I have two questions, Rob. The first is, as I understand the report, the end result will be two pair of four semis total, 4 units total.
That's right.
And they would be owned, freehold ownership by 4 different families. I realize there's basement units in the bottom.
Well, I'm kind of hoping that I'm going to own them, or my sons.
Okay.
We haven't got to that point yet. I have to pay for them first. But that's what the plan is that if we can afford it, that I would retain ownership of it, and we would deal with the landscape and that kind of thing. That's kind of the idea behind the family plan. But if we got into a financial issue, we'd have to sell one. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Yeah, follow on, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Last question, Rob. I'm interested to know your thoughts on that area is large rural residential areas with very, very large lots. And so each of the lots for each of the semis, I wondered if you'd comment on the size of the lot relative to the adjacent lots on that entire street, Side Road 18.
Right.
I know there's some concern about infill because people have bought those homes as large rural residential lots. Any comments, Rob?
Yeah, it's, I'd say that the area's going to be in transition now with the services that have been brought in. And the challenge for the building industry and for planners is to try to balance the need for infill and try to maintain the character for the area. So the way that we worked through this was to make the semi-lots, recognizing there are going to be supposed to be rentals, is that to make the lots deep enough so that each family, the lot would be deep enough so that a young family could go out and play soccer in their backyard without having an acre to take care of and cutting the lawn. So that's the reason why it is. So they're set back 50 feet, and then there's about 40 to 50 feet of backyards so that kids can play soccer. So then we have 4 of them, and then the front of them are supposed to be landscaped with native trees. And then the backyard, I was asked this by Valerie. She was our planner that was here at the public meeting. She's not able to attend today. But she says, so what's going on in the backyard? And I'm like, well, we can only put a house back there. That's all there is. It'd have to be a house appropriate for the size of the yard. There's just not enough room to do anything else back there. And from a rental standpoint, I think you have to we own a couple rentals, and you have to be aware that the tenants are not going to maintain the yards the way that a homeowner would be. And that's why we didn't extend the yards 375 feet deep. They're only 50 feet, or the total yard's 150 feet deep. So that was how we looked at it. We had a bunch of different ideas around there, but that was the best one that we could come up with. And the one guy's going to be taking care of the lawns is right back there. And it's tricky, when you're maneuvering on 25-foot wide or 30-foot wide lots, like get a fence in between, things like that. It takes a lot of time. So we'll keep the lots small so each tenant can take care of it, or Scotty can. And then the one big lot in the background, he takes care of that right now. So he's done a good job with it too.
Thank you very much, Rob. Anything else from council? No? Okay, we'll get at that. That's 7.1 on our consideration of report. So thank you very much for coming today and explaining that. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
6.2, Elora Center for the Arts, Kathryn Giffen and Sonia Cheng from the Elora Center for the Arts. And they're going to be speaking about the Pavilion MacDonald funding project. Welcome.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to update council on the information with respect to the MacDonald project, which is proceeding along. I think we last spoke to council, would have been Leanne Carter, who was the executive director, who is enjoying a well-deserved holiday. So I'm here in her stead. If I'll get right down to it, obviously we wanted to update on the steps that we've taken since the last May 17th council meeting regarding the signed agreement for the pavilion. The signed agreement for the pavilion requested that the Community Services Advisory Committee recommends to Council the approval of the Elora Centre for the Arts and Riverfest Outdoor Performance Pavilion project and enter into an agreement which includes plan for a sound and noise control, including neighborhood engagement and a green space plan and a parking plan, and subject to other necessary approvals. Unfortunately, we were not able to present at the last CSAC meetings due to cancellation, so we're now presenting directly to Council. And again, thank you for the opportunity. The third-party sound study has been completed, and unfortunately, I made the assumption that it was attached, and it was not. We're happy to provide that by way of email and distribute it to you, but I can tell you that there was the initial sound study done in 2021, and then further updates to the sound study were performed and questions answered by RWDI. And we have based the planning for the pavilion based on their recommendations. The location and the pavilion design details incorporated in the study include the following elements. There's a solid back wall, so you'll see a pictorial view of that. There's a solid back wall at the back of the pavilion to help block sound. We've angled the side walls that are south-facing to direct the sound down towards the Grand River. And there's also an angled roof, as you'll see, to direct sound out to that area. This is to minimize sound distribution and leakage to the neighboring property owners. The pavilion location as recommended by the sound study is shown in the next slide with the orange X. And it is, we have included a pictorial of the ultimate performance art space which is now an addition to the center, just to show you how it's located with respect to the project going forward. The privacy sound fencing will be at the edge of the property, and this was a recommendation, again, by the sound study. So if you imagine on the left-hand side where you'll see the recommended location of the pavilion, there is fencing along the parking area that will block sound northward on that side of the pavilion. And additional sound management plans that we have for the pavilion. The center has drafted what we call our internal pavilion booking guidelines, and it outlines the types of performances that will be permitted throughout the calendar year. And I think those were attached, but I, again, may be mistaken.
Yeah, and maybe the next slide, Lisa, so that they can see.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect, thanks.
Great. Essentially, we've graded these performances into 3 stages. Level 1 is basically an acoustic only. Level 2 would be for performances where actors or performers have a mic'd amplification. And then there is a level 3 performance, which would include minimal or meeting our decibel guidelines, but there will actually be monitors that would provide sound back to the individual performers for feedback, but it doesn't project out. So that would be what we would consider a level 3, meeting the maximum target of 105 decibels, which is a recommended standard from the sound noise study. And we would only allow 3 of those a year. These are not what you would consider main stage or even secondary stage Riverside productions. These would be like stage 3 productions that you would have heard at Riverside, a much more laid back and quieter performance. But nonetheless, so you're aware, there would be amplification. We have also developed a process for tracking the neighborhood feedback, and we'll get to a little bit more of that when I talk about the neighborhood engagement. And also, we plan to adjust the guidelines as required and reassess this every 6 months. It's going to be a rolling issue with lots of feedback from the neighbors and lots of feedback from the performers to make sure that everybody is satisfied with the pavilion and the performances that are happening there. We've also drafted what we call a noise control agreement, and that's for third parties who are actually with a third-party engineer, and these are to be used with people who are actually going to be the performers. The noise sound agreement outlines the maximum decibel dBA allowances. So these dBA allowances generally range from 90 to 105 decibels, which is a standard decibel height according to the RWI study. We measure that from 50 to 100 feet back from the pavilion, and we continue to monitor that. We'll also be monitoring that during their sound checks in advance of the presentation. These performers then are obligated to abide by the noise control agreement. And it outlines also the sound bylaws. The bylaws in particular requires for 11 o'clock cutoff, as you know, and we've specifically designated a 10 p.m. cutoff. That will stop the sound at 10 p.m. and allow for packing up and moving out before 11 o'clock so that the neighbors face the least disturbing sound. The next slide talks about our neighborhood engagement, and two communications were printed and delivered in person to all of the immediate neighbors of the Center for the Arts. Then the staff had either a in-person or over-the-phone discussion with the residents of 10 of the 12 listed addressees. 2 we couldn't make a connection with, and they were non-responsive. And generally, the feedback received regarding the acoustic pavilion has been very supportive. Particularly, they appreciated the care and consideration of the acoustic implications, direction, and location. They were impressed, specifically, that a sound study had been conducted. There was excitement for the programmatic opportunities that the pavilion would provide for the community, and there were a few additional requests. First, they wanted some further detail regarding the sound fencing at the south of the property, and that was provided to them, none of these next 3 items elicited any further concern. They also requested more detail regarding the types of groups that would be using this. Nobody wants a rock band that's, doing ACDC until 12 at night. They also requested that we coordinate, provide information as to how we would coordinate with the other parts of the pavilion and how the pavilion interacts with the other projects that the center undertakes. The community stakeholders were also surveyed, and that would be the next slide. Sorry, question, I'm sorry. No?
That's the next slide, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah, sorry. Am I supposed to pause for questions? Just tell me if I'm going too quickly here.
Sorry, go ahead, yeah.
All right. The center met with several of the community groups to gather information regarding the design of the pavilion, ensure that it could meet their needs, and participants that we included in that study were the Elora Community Theater, Elora Festival Singers, the Adrian Jones School of Music, Lorenzo Raffini, who was a former manager in city building initiatives for the city of Mississauga, and a musician himself, to get some more details about what would be essential for them, and obviously Riverfest, which was a partner in the initial MOU with respect to this project. We incorporated the feedback of the stakeholders, and particularly this related to things like how we would store, where they would store equipment, how they would ramp the equipment up, hanging bars for lightings, that sort of thing. And that was incorporated in the design of the pavilion. So more details on the actual pavilion itself, just so to give you some sense of the size of this pavilion. It's 25 feet across, about 14 feet deep, and you'll see how it is angled up. So it's 10 feet at the back of the stage and about 16 and a half feet at the top, and again, it angles out to provide direction for the sound. The stage height is raised to about 2 feet off the ground. That was, again, a recommendation from many of the people that were consulted on this. You have it flat on the ground, and it doesn't allow for maximizing the directional nature of where the sound will be going. So that was taken into design. And then electrical, once the pavilion's installed, the electrical and installation and lighting installation will be installed in the spring, when we would need amplification for that. The other thing that we had committed to providing update on was the parking and green space around the pavilion. This has been carefully considered as a part of this project, and it will also include the necessity of the landscaping that will be required for the future project expansion. So essentially, in terms of the parking itself, we'll have 12 additional parking spaces for a total of 32, including accessible parking spots. Once the pavilion is installed, the section will be seeded and sodded, depending on what is needed. And the overall site plan will include several trees that will be planted, professional landscaping, walkways, parking area, pavilion, and building. The next slide that I'm going to show you is a bit of an eye chart. Hopefully you had an opportunity to look at it, but it really is the site plan for the pavilion. And again, we've included the project for the future expansion, just so that you get a sense of how things fit in there. And Burnsides, obviously, is the contractor for that. So, timelines and next steps. As you are fully aware, the project is funded fully by the MacDonald Fund, thank you very much, and by the Government of Canada's Tourism Relief Fund. We have engineered stamped drawings for the pavilion, and they're ready to go. The contractor for the site work has been confirmed. That's the excavation and footing and structural concrete base. And then the contractor for the stonework has been confirmed. The site plan has been submitted for approval. Building permit submission, once the site plan is approved, would be a next step for us. A final update to the Heritage Committee will occur on September 13th. And then the plan is to begin work on October of this year. This is a time-sensitive project, not necessarily from the MacDonald Fund funding, but the Tourism Relief Fund has a very tight time frame, so we have to complete this essentially by the end of the year. We have a little wiggle room, but that's not that much to deal with. Now, the good news for that is that the actual structure of the pavilion is a prefab building, so we know what the timelines are for erection of that, and we can meet that. And then, I guess the last slide. We hope that we have certainly met the requirements that were outlined by the CSAC and Council, and hopefully that includes satisfaction for the sound and noise control, the neighborhood engagement, and the green space and parking plan. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them now. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Exciting, very, very exciting projects. Good to hear, and thanks for the very thorough update. Appreciate that. We do have a report coming out on 7.2, so in a few minutes we have a staff report that's associated with this project too, so we'll leave most of our questions for then. But is there any questions of clarification from the delegation today? Okay. Oh, Councillor McRae.
Thank you, Mayor Litton, through you. One question I have is related to your surveying of residents
Yes.
in the immediate vicinity.
Right.
Are there plans to survey residents who live across the river? Looking at the orientation of the pavilion, noise does carry, depending on wind gradient and temperature, for example, as well as topography. Will there be opportunities for residents across the river who may be hearing the noise to be able to reach out and provide you with feedback?
Well, and thank you. That's a very good question. I think, as I indicated, we're going to be monitoring this over the first 6 months of the project at the very least, and we will be sending out the noise complaint forms that you had seen. We'll also welcome any opportunity for them to make any comments on it through that process. We did not specifically address that group as one. It is quite a distance, and given the recommendation from RWDI with respect to the decibel levels and how far that would travel, it wasn't felt that it was necessary, but we certainly can do that. Yeah.
Councilor McCray, following?
And just as follow-up, Riverfest this weekend. I live at the north end of Salem. Down in the valley, I could hear the concert.
Right.
The entire weekend, so that's the only reason I'm raising that.
And that's a fair point, and that's why I tried to point out that the maximum decibel limit for everybody, Riverfest, mic'd singers, et cetera, is well within the average, what you would expect for an average decibel outdoor performance. So imagine it can't be any louder than, as I say, the very, very minimal stage 3. These are not ever, ever intended to be, you know, as I say, stage 1 or big performers. I mean, first of all, they're not going to get the audience, and secondly, it's just not allowed in the guidelines that we've outlined. But yeah, I appreciate. I knew that. You know, I certainly know that that would be a concern if I was a neighbor. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to consideration of the reports, 7.1, decision report on RZ07/22, Sideroad 18. So we had a delegation about this already. So Mariana is going to go through this report for us. Welcome, Mariana.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton, to members of council. The rezoning application is for the property located at 149 Sideroad 18 in Fergus. The property currently contains a single detached dwelling, which will be removed. It's approximately 0.42 hectares in size and generally has a narrow frontage with a significant depth, as was already described previously. The application proposes to rezone the property to allow intensification of the site for additional residential units. The zoning will change from R1A.70.4 to R2 exception, and those would be mostly along the front of the property to allow 2 new semi-detached units with 2 in each, so 4 units in total, and to R1A exception at the rear for a future single detached dwelling. The exceptions would provide site-specific regulations for reduced lot width and side yard setback, as well as allowing 1 accessory apartment in each unit with tandem parking. A planning justification brief and a scoped environmental impact study have been submitted in support of the application, which are attached to the staff report. An application has been made concurrently to the Land Division Committee at the county to sever the lot into the described parcels as shown in the report. So a public meeting was held on this application on May 25th, as required. 1 oral submission was received expressing questions about tree removals. A professional arborist has been retained to assess the health of trees and to provide advice on tree protection measures when the time comes for application for site plan approval. No other oral or written submissions were received from the public for this application, and in response to some of the comments received, the applicant has proposed to modify the plans to enlarge the depth of the semi-detached lots to allow increased front and rear yard depths, as was explained. Site-specific details are going to be addressed during site plan approval, such as servicing and tree protection. So the county and the GRCA have both been circulated and reviewed the application and provided comments with no objections. After reviewing the application and all the input received, staff is of the opinion that the rezoning meets the applicable policies and regulations in the provincial, county, and township plans and directives. And the application will increase the supply of rental housing. As such, staff recommends that the application be approved and that the corresponding bylaw that's attached to the report be enacted by council. And I'm able to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Mariana. Questions from council? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Mariana, the end result, I believe, will be 4 lots for each of the 4 semis. Would I be correct?
That's right.
And then what would be the lot size of each of the 4 lots for each of the semis? In imperial measure, if you could.
So looking at the plan here, the frontage would be approximately 7.8 meters. So, what's that to feet? Sorry. You're looking for imperial? Yeah, approximately that. And then the depth of each lot would be 38 meters. And that's been extended. So sorry, it would be longer. It would be 46 and a half meters.
Following, Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Mariana, I guess I'm just wanting to be clear. There's some concern about fit with the adjacent rural estate lots. So do you have any comments on that, Mariana, in terms of lot size of these lots as compared to the lot sizes on Side Road 18?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, when this property, these properties along these two streets, so 18 and 19, were developed, they were much wider, longer lots. A lot of that had to do with the fact that there was a lot of environmental protection because of wetlands and forested areas. So there was very little developable area in the middle. So the lots tended to be long and narrow. When the services came in on the roads, on these roads, it reduced the required minimum frontage from, I think, what was 30 meters originally to approximately 18. So that allowed, and what we saw happening was the evolution of change in this area where some lots were severed off and there were some key-shaped or flag-shaped lots created because services had come in and now lot sizes could be smaller. So I would call it an area of transition. So these are a little bit smaller, yes, than average, than what is seen there. But there's also some potential that's going to happen along some of these properties as these have become serviced and people tie into the water and sanitary rather than maintaining their well and septic. So it's generally, if you look at the site plan, these buildings are actually in the same general location as the existing house, which was set back from the street. So these are coming forward slightly, but they're still about 50 feet back, which is pretty significant for, it's unusual in a normal context in an urban center for a house to have a 50-foot setback. So it's going to help with the compatibility somewhat, given their setbacks and the increased depths.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Marilyn. Through you, Mariana. So the intent is that these will be long-term rental properties and that they will not be Airbnb?
That I can't confirm, through you, Mayor Linton. The intent, as you heard, is for the owner to keep them in the same ownership and rent them out. We don't have a short-term rental bylaw right now or regulations to license or inspect or regulate that. So there's little that we can do to prevent that from happening. Should an owner choose to rent one of the units as a short-term Airbnb or something like that. But from what the owner has said, it appears that it would be just rental units, typical rental units, permanent.
Anything else from council? Okay, I'll read the recommendation that the application RZ07/22 as modified be approved and the zoning bylaw amendment be given 3 readings and that further public consultation is not required. Can I get a mover for that? Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And thanks, Rob and the team, for coming and delegating today. Appreciate that. Thanks. Thanks. 7.2, MacDonald Funding Grant, ECFTA, Riverfest Pavilion, and I'll turn it over to Pat, Managing Director of Community Services, for her report. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you. We heard already from the Elora Centre for the Arts and Riverfest presentation about the pavilion. Just to remind council, back on May 17th, 2021, council approved this project to plan for an outdoor performance pavilion and enter into an agreement. There was the condition on a plan for sound and noise control, including neighborhood engagement, which we heard about today. The Elora Centre for the Arts and Riverfest have shown you their plans, and staff have reviewed and believe it meets the intent of direction provided by council, and looked to a mechanism to ensure that the agreement that we're making today verbally and within their guiding documents would be enforced. And so the recommendation from legal counsel was to have an additional amending agreement to the original agreement so that it could all be referenced in the future. Unfortunately, some of the attachments which were to go to the report, there was a bit of a mix-up because this was originally set for CSAC. That was cancelled at the last minute and moved to the council agenda. So I apologize if you did not receive all the attachments, but as they referenced, their guiding document and their agreements were attached to my report. So I guess I would turn this back over to you, Mayor Linton, if there are any questions and for the resolution or the recommendation in our report.
Okay, thanks very much, Pat. And I'll read the recommendations, then turn it over to council for questions, comments. I have a recommendation of the council of the Township of Center Wellington authorize the managing director of corporate services and treasurers to sign an amending agreement to the MacDonald grant agreement between the Township of Center Wellington and the Elora Center for the Arts and Lot 10 Productions, Inc., operating as Riverfest Elora, dated January 19th, 2022. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor Kittrus. Any questions, comments from council? Councillor McCrae?
Just a question, Mayor Linton. As a former member or employee of RWDI, do I have a potential conflict of interest if I participate in this discussion? I may have also hired some of the noise engineers.
Yeah, we can't give you advice on conflicts, but if there is a doubt, I declare.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to declare I may have a conflict of interest, and I'll excuse myself.
Okay. Councillor Dunsmore.
Yeah, not really a question, just a comment and a thank you to the Elora Center for the Arts. The CSAC committee had their concerns about this project and had asked that you engage the residents and do the sound study. And I'm thankful that you did that, and it made the process a lot easier. So credit to you goes for listening and doing what you said you would do. So thank you.
Councillor Kittrus?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a great project that's been a long time coming. I think that we should heartily encourage that to be passed. Thanks.
Okay, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, Pat. Thanks, Kathryn. Thanks, Sonia, for coming today. Congratulations. And that's a fast turnaround, so that's exciting. Okay, moving on to 7.3, application for an exemption to a noise bylaw. And our Deputy Municipal Clerk, Lisa, put that report together. Is there any questions for Lisa on this? What is this, another wedding or? Yeah, a wedding. Who wants to vote against the wedding? Have a recommendation of the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approves the request from Rebecca Muller for the exemption to bylaw 5001-05, the noise bylaw for the Township of Center Wellington to permit the amplification of music at 49 Sideroad 18, Fergus, on September the 10th, 2022, between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. for a wedding reception. Moved by Councillor McWayne, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And the wedding is a go. Moving on to 7.4, application for another exemption noise bylaw for another wedding. A recommendation the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approves the request from Vanessa Verdoni for an exception to the bylaw 5001-05, the noise bylaw for the Township of Center Wellington to permit the amplification of music at 6212 6th Line, Bellwood, on August 27th, 2022, between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. for a wedding reception. Moved by Councillor Kittrus, second by Councillor McCrae. All in favor? And that's carried. 7.5, appointment of municipal law enforcement officers. We do this from time to time when Alpha Parking Solutions requires new staff. So I have a recommendation of the Township Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a bylaw to appoint various employees of Alpha Technologies Systems operating as Alpha Parking Solutions as municipal law enforcement officers for the purpose of enforcing the township's parking bylaw. Can I get a mover for that? Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McCrae. Any questions about that one? All in favor? And that's carried. 7.6, appointment of a chief building official and building officials. And we have a report from our chief building official, Randy. Welcome, Randy.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Good afternoon, members of council. This will seem familiar to you. We did this last month, but it's a good news story why we're doing it again. So out of necessity, we had to bring it before you in July to get a building official appointed to provide much needed bench strength to our inspection program over the summer. And since that time, we've brought two more staff on board. One building official who started on August 9th, or 8th rather, I'm sorry, and a building permit technologist who started today. So as a result of that, I need to bring this appointment bylaw back before you and get your approval to appoint the full complement of building division staff. And I would certainly be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks very much, Randy, and good news to hear a full complement for building. I'll have a recommendation, then I'll turn it over to council. A recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorizes the mayor and clerk to execute a bylaw appointing a chief building official and building officials. Moved by Councillor McElwain and second by Councillor Dunsmore. Questions, comments from council? All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks, Randy.
Awesome.
7.7, demolition control from 18 George Street in the former township of Nickel. Over to you, Randy.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Hello again, members of council. This is a request for demolition of a two-story, 1,303 square foot single detached dwelling, including the foundation. It is the intention of the owners of the property to remove this house so that they can rebuild a new single detached dwelling in the future. This house did have some discussion at the Heritage Committee. It was built in 1870, although it is not recorded in the Township of Center Wellington Municipal Heritage Register and is not designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The Heritage Committee had no objections to the demolition, but they did request a photo inventory of the full house inside and out. Be provided to the Township of Center Wellington prior to demolition of the work commencing. I went ahead and made arrangements to have that done already, so it's complete. We've already done that recommendation. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on this report.
Thanks, Randy. We'll get the recommendation on the floor first, that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approves the issuance of a demolition permit to demolish the single detached dwelling located at 18 George Street, former Township of Nickel in Salem. Moved by Councillor McElwain and second by Councillor Dunsmore. Questions, comments from council? All in favor? And that is carried. Awesome. Thank you very much, Randy. Sticking with the demolition theme. Over to you again.
Thank you. This is kind of nice. I just hang out and go from report to report. Mayor Linton and members of council, this report is also for a house in the former township of Nickel. It's on North Street, so just up the street here. Excuse me, sorry. So this house, it's an existing two-story single detached house, 1,462 square feet. They want to demolish the entire single-family dwelling, including the foundation. The purpose is that the dwelling doesn't meet the needs of the current owners of the property. They would like to build a new single detached dwelling on the property. So it was built in 1948. It's not recorded in the Township of Center Wellington Municipal Heritage Register, and it is not designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act.
Thanks, Randy. I'll read the recommendation of the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approves the issuance of a demolition permit to demolish the single detached dwelling located at 318 North Street, former Township of Nickel in Salem. Moved by Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McWayne. Any questions, comments from Council? All in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Randy. Sticking with demolition, but shifting gears to Mariana, a partial demolition of a listed property. Mariana.
Thank you, Mayor Linton, through you. The owner of the property at 6523 Wellington Road 7, Elora South Inc., the proprietor of the Elora Mill development, has filed a notice of intent to demolish a portion of the structure on the south side of the Grand River, known to us all as the Walser Ruins. The reason for the demolition is to begin rehabilitation work on the building to reinstate a use on the site, which is expected to be retail commercial space as part of the next phase of the larger redevelopment project on the south side. The structure is in very poor condition, has been for many years. It has been stabilized over time to prevent further deterioration. However, the building must be rehabilitated now to ensure its future viability. The current proposal is to salvage in situ the elements that can be saved and repaired, remove the unstable portions of the building, reusing the stone to clad the new facade, and permanently removing the existing brick and concrete portions of the structure, mostly on the west side of the building, that do not contribute to the property's heritage value. The new portions will be added to the building as per appropriate heritage guidelines. And all of this information is set out in the reports attached to the staff report. In support of the demolition request and the future rehabilitation of the building, a Heritage Impact Assessment, or HIA, and a memo outlining the plans were received, and they are also attached to the report. If endorsed, it will partially fulfill the conditions of removal of the holding zone on this site. The holding zone requires a submission of an HIA and conservation plan, as well as site plan approval. So this would be fulfilling the first part of that condition. Site plan, I should note, has been submitted to the township, so that is also currently under review. The consultant presented the HIA to staff and Heritage Center Wellington at its meeting on August 9th. After questions and discussion, the committee endorsed the partial demolition of the Walser Ruin as outlined in the report and plans submitted with the application, and endorsed the HIA, which outlines the work that's proposed and how it will be undertaken. A further commemoration strategy will be provided as the project moves forward for approval to the committee. The committee requested additional details regarding a chimney stabilization strategy, which was prepared by Tacoma after the meeting and has been attached to your report as well in the agenda. It basically indicated that the chimney can be fully restored and is not in any immediate danger. As such, the committee is satisfied with all the information and plans received to date and recommends approval. Therefore, staff recommends that council endorse the partial demolition of the Walser Ruin for the purpose of rehabilitation of the building for commercial use as outlined in the supporting material, and further that council endorses the HIA in fulfillment of one of the conditions of the holding zone removal. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Mariana. I'm going to get the recommendation out there, and then I'll turn it over to council. Recommendation of the Council of the Township of Center Wellington: approve the partial demolition of the Walser Ruins of the property known as 6523 Wellington Road 7, formerly 32 Ross Street of Elora, as outlined to facilitate redevelopment of the property, subject to submission of a chimney stabilization strategy to Heritage Center Wellington. And the property on 6523 Wellington Road 7, Elora, remains on the Municipal Heritage Register. and that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington endorses the Heritage Impact Assessment for the Walser ruins located at 6523 Wellington Road 7, Elora, dated June 20th, 2022. Move for that, Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. Questions, comments from Council? Councillor Kitchers?
Thank you, Mayor. Marianne, I was just wondering, how large is the holding? How much area? Is it just for that building, or is it for a more extensive area?
Through you, the holding would be on a larger parcel, but this is one piece. So they've been done separately as the buildings have evolved. So there would be additional, I believe there's additional holding provisions, but this would just be for this parcel.
Anything else from Council? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Marianne, I had a question about the heritage attributes and the heritage impact assessment. It would seem to me, Mariana, that the heritage impact assessment isn't fully complete. Can you help me understand which of the built heritage resources in the area were assessed for impact of this proposal? Like can you help me understand that?
Are you, through you, are you talking about adjacent properties?
Yes, yes.
So I actually also have Sheldon from the SBA architect firm here to answer questions if needed, and Mackenzie. Is it okay if I ask Sheldon to come up to answer? Do you want to come up? Just trying to go through the HIA here so I can specifically.
Thank you. So in regards to assessing the impact to the adjacent heritage structures, what we did look at was its relationship to both the existing heritage property to the south, which is the current chapel building that was recently restored, as well as its relationship to the buildings across the river, and like the overall context as a whole. And that is identified in the first, I can't remember exactly which chapter of the report, but it's near the beginning, looking at the overall context. And basically the result of that is, because we are retaining essentially the same footprint of the building, as well as its three primary facades, the impact, like the visual impact to the adjacent heritage structures is basically non-existent. We're not changing, like we're maintaining all of the view corridors, as well as the spatial relationship between them all. So the impact is minimal, if anything. Sorry.
Following, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. So then, have you assessed the heritage impact on adjacent properties, such as the drill shed or the historic buildings across on the south side?
Well, there will be no impacts, as far as I'm aware, to the buildings on the north side of the river, other than the visual relationship between the two. And as I said, because there may be some potential, vibration from the work itself, but we're minimizing that just to reduce damage to our own structure. So any vibration would damage our building before it damaged any of the adjacent, if that is what you're getting at?
I think I hear no.
Yeah.
Would I be correct? Yeah. What, did you assess it relative to other buildings in the vicinity, the heritage impact, not the vibration?
Well, sorry, I'm not understanding the question of how the heritage aspects of the buildings across the river would be impacted, other than the visual relationship between the two.
I'm wanting to understand the depth of the heritage impact assessment and which built heritage resources in the area were assessed for heritage impact. Which buildings, which built heritage attributes in the vicinity were assessed for heritage impact as a result of this proposal here?
Right. Well, we did look at all of the full list of all the adjacent listed and designated properties, which is there's a full chart of them all on page 13. starting on page 13 and 14 of the report, which is section 2.6, which is the written and visual description of the surrounding buildings and heritage context, which does identify both all the numerous buildings across the river, but in regards to yes, thank you. In regards to the individual attributes of the buildings across the river, we are not impacting those whatsoever. So there was nothing to be assessed. As I said, the visual relationship between our building, like the Walser Ruin, and the buildings across the river is going to be maintained. In fact, the river wall, the north wall of our building, is being maintained in its entirety. As part of the construction process, we're anticipating to take down approximately maybe 3 or 4 feet off the top, but it will be restored back to its original height. So its relationship and to the buildings across the street, across the river, will not be affected.
Can I also add something? So when we're looking at adjacency, across the street is not considered adjacent as by definition under the Planning Act. With the drill shed and with the Little Folks building on the south side, when you look at impacts, you look at shadows, massing. This building itself will not be changing all that much from what it was originally in terms of its height and footprint, and therefore would not be at all impacting the drill shed building or the building across the street, or sorry, to the south.
Councillor Kitchus?
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification for the public, there was always mention of a public walkway. Is that going to be into the development that's happening on the south side? Is that going to be on the south side of the building, or is it going to be on the river side?
I think in this context, maybe Mackenzie can answer.
It's still under development, and we're still looking at the overall plan, so we're open to both locations.
Oh, okay, so you haven't really narrowed that down yet. I just wanted to know, because a lot of was mentioned about the public, walkway around the river and stuff like that, and so I just wanted to know whether that was.
No, sorry, this study specifically was looking
Just for
at
the building.
just our building itself, essentially from the face of the bridge to the smokestack.
Okay. Councillor Foster?
Just by way of clarification then, Mariana, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. So this HIA did not assess the heritage impact of adjacent properties on the south side of the river. Did I hear you correctly?
It identified all of the properties in the surrounding area and on the south side of the river.
Did it assess them for heritage impact?
It was determined that there were no heritage impacts because they are sufficient distance away and there were no heritage impacts identified for restoring this building.
Anything else from council? Okay, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sheldon. Thanks, Mariana. Moving on to 7.2, application for a toll booth from the Elora firefighters. A report in your package from our Deputy Municipal Clerk. I have a recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorizes the Mayor and Clerk to execute a bylaw authorizing a fundraising activity in the form of soliciting by a toll booth on Metcalf Street in Elora on Saturday, September 17th, 2022 from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. by the Elora Firefighters Association on behalf of Muscular Dystrophy Canada. Mover for that, please. Councillor McElwain, second by Councillor McCrae. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to 7.11, road dedication bylaw. A couple of these are fairly administrative in nature, and there's a report in your package that Mariana can speak to. I have a recommend. Do you want to highlight anything, or just answer questions, Mariana? Okay, so I have a recommendation. The Council of the Township Center Wellington gives 3 readings to a bylaw to dedicate land as a public highway. Mover for that, please. Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McCrae. Any questions, comments from council? All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to 712, part lot control exemption bylaw. Again, fairly administrative. Do you want to mention anything on that one, Mariana? Or just answer questions?
Just to create 45 townhouse dwellings.
Okay, right. I have a recommendation of the Council of the Township of Southern Wellington give 3 readings to a bylaw to exempt part of Block 2278, Plan 61M-245 from the part law control provisions of the Planning Act. Move for that, please. Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor Van Leeuwen. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to 713, a sewer use bylaw update. And we have Dino, who just made his entrance. Welcome, Dino.
Timing's everything. Thank you. Mayor Linton and members of council, as you recall, in 2020, staff had brought forward to council the sewer use bylaw for information and endorsement. Subsequent to that council meeting and through internal and external consultation, it was recognized that the bylaw as previously written was very technical in nature and difficult to navigate. To address this, a comprehensive review was undertaken and in consultation with clerks and Mr. Pauldre. The intent was to maintain the same standards, process, requirements, etc., while producing a more user-friendly version that is easier to navigate for our industry, commercial, and industrial sectors. Many thanks to Michael Mullen, our Supervisor of Special Projects and Customer Service, as well as Paul Dre and clerks in their efforts and assistance in the production of the updated bylaw. Today's staff is looking for council endorsement and approval for this final version of the Center Wellington Sewer Use Bylaw. I'm happy to address any questions council may have.
Thanks very much, Dino. Questions, comments from council? Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Through you, I have 5 questions. Dino, in terms of the swimming pool water, according to section 6.2 and 6.2b, no one is allowed to discharge swimming pool water that is either salt water or water with a chlorine residual exceeding a 40 milligram per liter into a storm sewer. Can one discharge pool water that is less than 4 milligrams per liter into a storm sewer?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Linton, yes. Through this bylaw, a person can discharge pool water that is less than 4 milligrams per liter of chlorine.
Okay, so my next question then is, does section 6.2 and 6.2b conflict with section 24.1a and b that states swimming pool water can only be discharged to a private sanitary sewer or onto the owner's property, so it is controlled on the owner's property?
Thank you. Great question. And again, through you, Mayor Linton, to provide clarification, that connection was intended for large recreational pools, such as a hotel swimming pool or our Sportsplex swimming pool, for example. And that is to ensure that it is connected on their own property and not directly to our sanitary system. Discharge of a lot of water could cause backup for neighboring properties and deleterious effects to the neighboring properties, of course. The option to control it on an owner's property and controlled on the owner's property is for smaller pools, of course, residential pools, and that allows for owners to, with the requirement to control that water so that it doesn't flood their neighbors, it doesn't cause excessive water in a right-of-way, washouts, example, et cetera, I mean.
Okay. So I was curious, what is a private sanitary sewer? Is this the town sewer system, or is this like a weeping bed, or?
It could refer to a weeping bed. However, it was more intended to be a connection on private property, so not in the right-of-way.
Okay, so it's not really connecting to the actual township sewer system?
It could, yes.
It could? Yeah. Okay.
But not directly, sorry. It would be within their property, not a direct connection to the sanitary sewer itself. So it would come out your lateral that services your property.
Oh, okay. And then regarding establishing an appeal tribunal, would that be council, for example?
Thank you. Again, through you, Mayor Linton. The bylaw establishes that an appeal tribunal will be appointed through council. However, this process has not yet been established and verified. But the intent is to work with clerks to develop a terms of reference that will be brought forward to council at a future time.
Okay. Thank you. And then my final question is, What operational logistics are involved in accommodating an extra strength surcharge agreement? For example, can the business discharge directly into the sewers, or must the discharge be trucked to the waste treatment plant for gradual mixing with the other effluent?
Again, a great question, and thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton. The extra strength surcharge agreement is simply recognition that the industry is discharging constituents in their wastewater that are above the limits established in the bylaw, and to set a max limit and to set, you know, the rate of discharge. Businesses won't have to change any of their operational procedures. They'll continue to operate as per normal. There may be fees applied depending on the circumstances to accommodate for that extra strength surcharge agreement, and that's simply to handle the extra wastewater treatment requirements at the plant. It's a very nominal fee, it's not much, and it's applied quarterly, I should say.
And in terms of what that extra would be, it can easily be sort of incorporated into the existing effluent so that there won't be some sort of a negative reaction from this extra stuff coming in.
Yes, that's correct. Anything that would have a deleterious effect is essentially under prohibition. Those things are prohibited, period. You would have to seek pre-treatment on your property. We don't really foresee any industry having that issue in Centre Wellington. The extra strength surcharge agreement will handle, by and large, anything that we may encounter. And again, it's simply a recognition that it's above and to set an absolute max.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from council? Okay, I'll read the recommendation of the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington, authorizing the mayor and municipal clerk to execute a bylaw to revoke and replace bylaw 2849 sewer use Fergus and bylaw 3090 sewer use Elora, with a bylaw to regulate sewer use of the township's wastewater systems. Moved by Councillor Foster, second by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dino. Moving on to 714, request for proposal for termite management services. And a report was done by Sandy, purchasing a risk supervisor, and I'm going to turn it over to Adam McNabb.
Thank you, Mayor Linton, and through you. This report provides recommendations and seeks council direction for staff to enter contract negotiations with Balson Preventative Solutions, Inc., pursuant to request for proposal 32-22 for termite management services. Recommendation is that council authorize contract negotiations between staff and Balson Preventive Solutions, Inc., to perform termite management services provided at a total upset limit of $200,000 to facilitate project initiation, public education, nematode treatment, and provision of yard wood waste cleanup bins for the initial one-year term. The proposal was issued in accordance with the township's purchasing and procurement bylaw. There were 4 plan takers and 2 responses received. Responses were evaluated and scored by the selection committee, and the results of the evaluation are reflected in the staff recommendation being presented here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. I'll read the recommendations and turn it to council. That the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington directs staff to enter contract negotiations with Balson Preventative Solutions, Inc., pursuant to request for proposal number 32-22, termite management services, to confirm services to be provided at a total upset limit of $200,000 to facilitate project initiation, public education, fall nematode treatment, and provision of fall yard wood waste cleanup bins for the initial one-year term. Moved by Councillor McCrae, second by Councillor McElwain. Any questions, comments about that? Councillor McCrae.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Through you to Adam. Regarding public engagement and education, would businesses be included in the educational piece? For example, advising landscapers or landscape supply centers about not using untreated mulch or wood retaining walls in termite areas?
Perhaps best to turn this over to one of the selection committee members, and Randy, I believe, is best to discuss that.
Yeah, I was eyeing him there. I knew it was going to him. Randy?
I was going to wink back at you. Through you, Mayor Linton, thank you for that question. That's a very big part of public education. So a lot of this, is focusing on homeowners in what we're calling the red zones. But of course, on a broader scale, I think it is very important that the public education does reach out to all the players involved, and certainly landscapers with mulch. A big thing is the transfer of plants like hostas, the root balls. If you get those from a termite infested area, you bring them to a non-infested area, and now you got another infested area. So that's going to, thank you for bringing that point across, and that'll be part of the discussion, but I think is an important part of the public education.
Councillor McElwain?
Thanks, Mayor. One of the statements in here refers to the fact that a property in the red zone may refuse treatment. And I can see where that's a possibility, or probably even a probability. Is there any bylaw that can force people to have a treatment? Because as long as they're there, you ain't never going to get rid of the termites, so to speak. So is there a possibility of a bylaw to enforce that?
So through you, Mayor Linton, the Township of Centre Wellington currently does have a termite bylaw. And that bylaw does allow for enforcement activity. If we become aware that a property has termite infestation, we can order treatment. So short answer to your question, yes, we can order treatment. Yeah. Now it'd be a little bit different in that scenario. Like we wouldn't order them to treat using this program. I think if it got to the point where we ordered them to treat, they would be responsible to hire their own contractor and treat at their own cost.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Randy, for the benefit of the residents in North Fergus in particular, what steps do residents need to take to get access to this program?
So I think the initiation of this program, the first steps will be reaching out. Obviously, we need to secure permission of these property owners to enter their property for these nematode treatments. So one of the responsibilities that will be upon the contractor, Balson, will be to reach out to all of those homeowners with correspondence. Let them know the program is starting. Let them know when it's going to take place. And there'll be something for them to sign back saying that, yes, we give permission for the township's contractor to enter our property. So yeah, there'll be an enormous amount of outreach right at the start.
Thanks, Randy. Follow on, Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Randy, would there be like a wait list? Can residents get into the queue in anticipation of treatment? Is there a process like that where residents can let us know that they want to engage in the treatment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's our intention to accomplish all of the fall nematode treatment this fall. I think the discussions with Balson will be more in line with what systematic application, property by property, is going to accomplish this the quickest, as opposed to people getting sort of first on the list type thing. We want to accomplish it all this fall, first round. So I mean, we'll discuss that with Balson, but I think that the treatment, if I understand you, and I may have misunderstood your question, but
well, Randy, let me put it this way: what should Joe and Jane Citizen do who are interested in this treatment, if anything?
They just need to respond back to the outreach from Balson saying, yes, we very much agree to you doing this to our property. Let's make it happen. Yeah, that's all they need to do.
All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks very much, Randy. Good to get that program off the ground.
Awesome. Thank you.
Section 8, we have several information items, the operating results, June 30th. 8.2, capital project status from June 30th. We have the Elora Cemetery fees update. 8.4, diversity, equity, and inclusivity update. Tree Trust Municipal Analysis 2021. A number of reports there for council's information. Any questions on any of those? Councillor Kittrus?
I have a few questions.
Hit your mic there.
On the capital project status. Number 39. I just want some clarification. It says that the connecting links application was unsuccessful. Is that for the bike lanes? Like, was that part of that whole thing?
Colin?
Yeah, through Mayor Linton. So that was our fall 2021 application. So we heard, I believe it was in the spring of this year, that our application for grant funding through the Connecting Links program was unsuccessful.
Okay. So was that part of that proposal for the bike lanes?
That was based on the approved option that council endorsed back in, I think that was late summer, early fall of 2021.
Okay. Thank you. I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Item 60. I was wondering if you could outline exactly on the Fifth Line Bridge in West Garry how long those repairs will last. Because you know in the summer there were 3 bridges out at one point, and this was the one that was just temporarily being repaired. No? Okay.
Yeah, through Mayor Linton. So item 60 refers to Bridge 4WG, which is the was a bowstring bridge just south of County Road 18.
Okay.
So it's on the south side of the river. Yeah, so that's the bridge that was reopened last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the bridges that were repaired in West Garry temporarily this summer, how long will that be lasting? The temporary.
The temporary repairs.
Yes.
So through Mayor Linton, we do have plans to do a bridge deck rehabilitation program for bridge. You're referring to Bridge 18WG. Sorry, the numbers are firmly imprinted in my head, not everyone else's. But 18WG we are looking at a deck rehab for Bridge 18WG, and with subject to budget approval, we're looking at bringing that forward for 2023. So
okay,
that's,
so clarification: there'll be that rehabilitation and another bridge, the one south of it, that will be done in 2023.
Yeah, obviously schedules need to be coordinated between the two, so that we're not kind of having landlocked between two closed structures, but certainly, 16WG, which is also on Fifth Line, is the current closed bridge that is scheduled for 2023.
Well, thank you for trying to accommodate those residents. I have another question about 73, and it's the 8th line. I've been asked a lot about 8th line. North of, I forget what the road that is. I call it Northfield Road. So I'm just wondering when the construction there is going to be for the 8th line. Like, what's the schedule for that?
Okay, for sure. We're just talking about these at senior management team as part of our 2023 budgets. So currently, that the section of 8th line north of County Road 18 Currently, I believe it's a couple years out. But in terms of need, you know, staff are looking at moving that one forward, and accelerating the timing for that one. So it's a bit of a, we have to do a bit of shifting through the capital budget process, but that's something that we're looking at. I think currently it's in 25 right now, 2025. And I can confirm, I'll send you an email to confirm that timing.
I just kind of have somebody that's asking me, like every week, when that road is going to be, or what's the schedule, or what portion of it is going to be done when, and stuff like that. So I just kind of would like to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I can go through the 22 budget and get that timing for you, Councillor Kittredge, and so you can provide to the resident.
The caveat is that the little thing like the budget has to be passed. Anything else from council? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, question for Mark Brady. Mark, I was looking over the variance report. I just wondered if there was anything that you felt was noteworthy or material that was significant or important or out of whack?
You didn't know if you'd get an opportunity today.
Exactly, this is
You're
great.
in the sun here, that's
Yeah,
awesome for your Mark.
usually I prep these reports and they just sit there and there's no questions. So thank you for the question, Councillor Foster. Through you, Mayor Linton. Just to sum up the whole report, I guess the overriding favorable variances, we should end up with a favorable variance for our supplementary taxation this year, which is a good precursor or a good way of estimating what our growth next year will be. Also, investment income is certainly going to turn out on the positive side as well for this year. We've had a number of GICs that were at 1.5%, and we're renewing now at about close to 4.5%, so that's certainly helping. Vacant positions, if you're reading through the report, is a pretty common theme as well. We've had some turnover, so those vacancies have created some surpluses in certain departments. And on the negative side, I think every municipality is facing this, and that's fuel costs. Certainly going to be a challenge in the public works area. Right now, we're almost at our budget for the year for fuel. Repair and maintenance costs as well for public works could be a bit of a challenge. And a big reason for the fuel costs is our winter control costs are up this year. The snow was heavier, the snowfall was heavier than the past few years. Of course, we use averages for that. And right now, I believe in the report, it says we're at 77% of our winter control costs, and usually at this point in time, we're at about 70%. So who knows what the fall holds, but I guess we just wait and see. But that certainly has had an impact on fuel costs as well.
Councillor Foster?
Thanks, Mayor. So, Mark, from a sort of a financial management standpoint, are any of these materially a concern that we should be aware of?
I think fuel certainly is a concern, but that'll, I think it's going to be offset by the surplus we're going to see on the investment income side of things. So they'll probably offset, and we'll end up with a small surplus is kind of what I'm guessing at this point.
Anything else on the information items? Councillor Kittredge?
I have a question about the diversity, equity, inclusivity update. And I'm wondering if I could ask if the latest Stats Canada data that was just released in August will be used to inform the members of this committee. And one of the outlining details of that report about an increase in hate-motivated crimes was that the Catholic hate crimes increased 260% over the previous year, and by far was the largest number of increase of any category. And as usual, Jewish increased 47%, Muslim 71%, but this Catholic one, and just generally religious was higher than any or sexual orientation or any other. And so I'm wondering how that will be accommodated on our future diversity, equity, and inclusiveness.
So that's a tough question. Obviously, we're not going past the terms of reference. So related to the terms of reference and how that's worded in the package that we have, is there anything that you want to respond to about that question, Pat?
Well, it's just that the members, it doesn't have, it's sort of like the trendy discriminations are on there. And I'm just wondering, this is a new phenomenon that's happening, and I'm just wondering if that will be included in the.
Yeah, so I
It's
know
on page 3.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the page here. So I think specifically you're talking about the items under the page. The committee is to promote and foster inclusion and to address issues of discrimination based on, and then there's a whole listing of everything there.
But it says membership, and it has membership on there, and I'm just wondering, that's in committee membership.
Right, so faith-based diversity is on that, so.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, I'm talking about a specific discrimination that's exploding throughout Canada, and I'm just wondering if that's going to be addressed in our committees.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and ask, you know, Pat, the faith-based one covers that off, so if you have anything to relate about that, go ahead.
I'm actually going to ask Kristen Drexler to come up, who prepared this report, and share her thoughts on that if she can.
Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you. I can imagine once that committee is put together, based on the terms of reference, that all the data that comes in from different studies would be part of that discussion and that conversation, especially if it is something that is trending at the time.
But when you say faith-based diversity, if there's somebody that's not in that faith, like, how are you going to be representing them? So, like, how many members is from that? I'm asking.
I can imagine also that people who are on that committee would be looking at all opportunities of DEI, not just the one silo that they represent. So I can imagine that if that is something that is coming up in the news and as a trend, that
it's not in the news. This is
sorry, Councillor Kitt, just let our staff respond to the question before you ask another one. Kitchen?
I was just going to say that I can imagine that if it is something that is being affected in the schools, being represented in workplaces, that it's something that committee as a whole would be interested in hearing about and looking at. And we have had some experts in the field that have been helping us thus far, that I imagine that we had talked that maybe it would be good to keep them on board to check in on an annual basis to make sure that we're accountable and that we're going down the right path. And I'm sure that if we didn't catch that, like if that, not we as in me, but if the committee did not catch that, that would be something that they would also flag for us.
Follow on, Councillor Kitchus.
I have a little bit of concerns about, because sometimes these committees are made of certain demographics, and since that is trending, so proportionally it's 10 times the Canadian rate for acts. It seems like that needs to be brought attention to. It's not in the news. This is what the discrimination is about. It's not in the news.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that's
it's Statistics Canada, you know, but it's not very reported. So I'm just wondering, like, so I'm not really concerned about, or I am concerned that it isn't in the news because it's one thing that's not talked about. So I'm just wondering, like, how our committee will address that.
And I think that's where relying on the experts in the field to flag us on things that in our community we're not necessarily aware of, would be where we would rely on their expertise to help guide us.
And just to clarify, a new council, this is a committee that will report directly to council, and a new council will be on the hook for approving the memberships to that committee, just like every advisory committee. Councillor Van Loon?
Thank you. Actually, it's a similar related question, but when you're getting into the membership and the discussions about who's on the committee, how would you deal with conflicts? For example, when you have different groups that actually stand on completely opposite and opposing sides. It's something I was concerned about. I think that diversity, equity, inclusion is actually, it's a dangerous thing for us to be promoting, because you have a community built of many different pieces, and how is a township to promote, especially when some have opposing viewpoints. The idea is that we treat everybody with respect, but you're going to have a point where, how do you promote that? So within the committee, are they going to have some kinds of terms of reference to say that, to ensure that that type of equity is even done within the committee? And I think that's the important part too. How do you get there?
I think that we would agree with you that that is definitely a risk. And one of the things that we had talked about is if we don't have that skill set on the committee naturally, somebody who can be a negotiator, somebody who can help make sure that the process that the committee themselves outlined, that they wanted to make sure that they had terms of reference for themselves and how they behave and how they respect each other, their differences, then that would be something that we could bring on as a skill set onto that committee intentionally, very intentionally.
Anything else from council on any of the items in the information? Thanks, Kristen. Okay, moving on to our bylaws. We have a host of bylaws here. I have a recommendation that bylaws 2022-61 and 2022-67 be read a first, second, and third time and passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal affixed. Have a mover for that, please. Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McCrae. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to notice of motion. We have a notice of motion for reconsideration presented by Councillor McElwain. So you'll see it on your agenda. This would be slated for us to discuss at our last council meeting in September. Councillor Dunsmore?
Yes, through you, Your Worship, we have in our procedural bylaw an option for this council to set aside the procedural bylaw and deal with the notice of motion immediately. And I would like to move that we set aside our procedural bylaw and vote on this today.
Okay, so just a reminder to council that a notice of reconsideration will require a 2/3 vote, and that means it has to pass with 5 members of council voting in favor of that. Okay? So you've put forward a motion, sorry.
Yes, you're right, you're correct, but also a procedural variance requires 2/3 majority.
Yeah.
No, you said reconsideration, we're not there yet. This is
This is to waive our procedural bylaw for this item, and then we'll do a reconsideration, and then that also has to pass with a 2/3 majority. Very complex stuff here. Okay, so you moved that to set aside a procedures bylaw for this item. Seconded by Councillor Foster. Do we have a discussion about that? Or no, I don't think we do.
It's up to you.
It's up to me.
If it's unclear, it's up to you.
All in favor of waiving our procedures bylaw to deal with this today? And that's opposed. So that gets the 5 it needs. So we waived our procedures bylaw, and the next item then would be a motion to reconsider. Yep. Councillor Van Loon?
Can we have a 5-minute washroom break?
Yeah, but let me get this on, and if we do decide to reconsider, I was going exactly there, Councillor Van Loon. Motion to reconsider, which also needs 2/3. Councillor Foster, second by Councillor Dunsmore. for this reconsideration? Yeah. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried, and I'll turn it to our clerk for a vote.
Through you, Councillor Van Leeuwen. This is reconsideration.
No.
Councillor Foster?
Yes.
Councillor McElwain?
Yes.
Councillor McRae?
Yes.
Councillor Kittredge?
No.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yes.
And Mayor Linton.
Yes.
That's 5.
And that passes?
With 5, yes.
With 5, okay. Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Councillor McElwain. Yeah. Sorry, just use your mic.
Typically, before you pass a motion, you read the motion, and we haven't done that at all, so I'm just curious whether.
Yeah, so we reconsidered it. Now I'll turn the floor over to you when we get back from our washroom break, and then you'll introduce that motion. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna have a 5-minute washroom break. You don't have to go to the washroom, you can do whatever you want, but you have 5 minutes to do it.
There was no palliative care proposal.
The mover and seconder?
You weren't there.
Foster and Dunsmore. I think that's kind of the point. as to what we're reconsidering. Yeah, or just make it clear that the motion that we previously passed was to reconsider the original motion.
Well, to support
The original, recommendation
request
from,
for-
yes,
so I should
or
have
just
that.
even the first part of that, or like,
Yeah, official, there is.
yes, yes,
Whereas Dr. Simpson delegated to council for an official letter of support.
yes, yes. Just say that's what we're reconsidering, just so that's perfectly clear for everybody.
Okay.
Who's not my fault in the day?
Oh,
Did it get cold in here when we left? Or just me?
I don't know.
Okay, we're all back here. So I just wanted to clarify what we're doing right now. So we are going back. We've passed with 2/3 majority. We've passed reconsidering the original motion that came to us as a result of Dr. Simpson's delegation. So what we're reconsidering now is that the Township of Center Wellington provided an official letter of support for a rural hospice to serve Wellington County. So that's the question that we're returning to based on that procedural, those procedural actions that we just took. Okay, so everybody clear? We're not talking about reconsideration. We're talking about the item now that Dr. Simpson came and spoke to us about. Okay, and with that, because it's Councillor, anybody unclear about the process, first of all, before I turn it to Councillor McElwain? Councillor Kitches?
I'd like to make an amendment on that original.
There's nothing to amend.
There's nothing to amend. There's nothing on the floor.
Well, when it gets to the floor, I want to amend that.
How do you amend something you don't know what's there?
Yeah, we don't know what's on the floor, so, okay, we'll keep it in mind. Well, yeah, but Councillor McElwain hasn't done anything yet. Who knows what he has up his sleeve? Councillor McElwain.
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas Dr. Simpson delegated to Council July 18, 2022, on behalf of Dr. Gower and himself, requesting that Council provide an official letter of support for a rural hospice to serve Wellington County. and whereas a motion was made to provide the letter of support, and whereas the council discussion was almost 100% focused on MAID and euthanasia, and whereas some councillors did not believe they had been provided sufficient pertinent material to make an informed decision, and whereas a deferral was not approved, and whereas the motion was defeated, and whereas those councillors have now had time to do their own research, now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington provide an official letter of support for a rural hospice to serve Wellington County.
Thanks very much, Councillor McLean, for that. A mover?
He'll be the mover.
Sorry, I meant to say a seconder. Councillor Foster? Council, comments, questions? Councillor Kitchus?
I'd like to make amendment on that. I'd like to move that we amend that rural hospice be for palliative care and not MAID.
No, that's not an amendment, B. That's a brand new motion, and that wasn't what we were presented, so that wasn't what we're talking about today.
Okay.
Anything else from council? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to speak in favor of this motion after lengthy and detailed consultation with members of the community, my own constituents, Dr. Patrick Otto, Dr. Simpson himself, and Dr. Barbara Clunas, as well as a number of paramedics, a funeral director, and ordinary citizens. Friends, there is widespread support for a hospice in Centre Wellington. I talked and had meaningful and deep conversations with 63 different people, and it was both passionate and unanimous in support of having a hospice. So that's my first point. My second point is I did discuss the matter with our Member of Parliament, Michael Cheng, and the Parliament of Canada passed a law, C-14, and a key aspect of that law is that MAID is only offered to competent adults whose death is reasonably foreseeable. So by competent, that means you are able to make the decision yourself. You have the ability to enter into such a decision. So anyone who has mental health issues would not then be eligible because they would not be competent, for example. Secondly, Dr. Simpson pointed out how, when I met with him, that not one, not two, but 3 doctors must sign off and agree as a medical consensus that death is reasonably foreseeable and that the patient is suffering. And there needs to be a consensus of 3 doctors to sign off. The third point I want to make is that no medical doctor is compelled to provide the service. Any doctor may choose not to offer the service or offer the item. So the most important point to me is out of the sort of 60 and more citizens that I talked to, it was nearly unanimous and passionate, the support for a hospice, and also the support for MAID. MAID is legal in Canada. We do not even have jurisdiction on the subject of MAID. It belongs in the court of the Parliament of Canada. The Sue Rodriguez decision has made it clear that MAID is legal in Canada. So I want to point out that we don't have jurisdiction here in this court on the subject of MAID. It's legal in Canada and it is available. So we simply don't even have jurisdiction on the medical ethical part of MAID. The question before us, gentlemen, is should we have a hospice in Centre Wellington? And I want to speak in favor of that because there is widespread support in the community to have a hospice.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Councillor Van Loon?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't have the opportunity to adjust this this recommendation, mostly because I do think that that a hospice can be a beautiful thing, especially when it's palliative care and end-of-life care. MAID in itself is not health care, and I think that we need to remember that. Especially for somebody like myself, I don't believe that we should be able to take our life at a certain point regardless. There are a few pieces that I would, so for example, Councillor Foster mentioned the requirements for MAID. But interesting enough, Bill C7, which the Health Canada MAID report, they actually changed that. So Bill C7 removed the requirement that a person's natural death be reasonably foreseeable to qualify for assisted death. So therefore, people who are not terminally ill can actually die by euthanasia. This was back in 2020, I believe. Bill C7 permits a doctor or nurse practitioner to lethally inject a person who's incapable of consenting if that person was previously approved for assisted death. So what we're seeing, Bill C7 will waive the 10-day waiting period for a person's death. So we've seen a huge change in MAID already as it goes. And especially I think when you go back to, I think it's Netherlands, who's actually really was quite forward in that, thinking that it wasn't really a big issue. They're now tracking that as when we say these are some of the requirements why we can take our life. It's also expanded into many, many different areas of why you say, well, I don't feel like suffering from this mental illness or from actually poverty. We start seeing. So it's a slippery slope, and it seems to be running fast. And I really, really would love the idea of being able to have a hospice here, but without having to, if I would say, stub our toe in the idea that we're going to perform MAID, which really goes against what I believe. So it's too bad that you won't, or that we can't change this motion. Thanks.
And I don't want to speak to that not being an amendment that I would consider being appropriate, is because Dr. Simpson, if you were here for the delegation, Dr. Simpson made it very clear that one of the reasons why they're moving ahead with this proposal is so that they can perform this service for people. Otherwise, they might partner with another hospice. So that's not what we're being asked to do. We're not running this facility. That's not our facility. We're being asked for a letter of support for what they want to do. So we can't modify what they've brought to us. So that's why I didn't think it was appropriate for us to make modifications to their request for a letter of support for what they want to do. Right? Councillor Kittredge?
Thank you, Mayor. First, to address Councillor Foster's considerations, as discussed by Councillor Van Leeuwen, C7 has obliterated all the doctor-approved recommendations necessary for assisted MAID. So much so that people without housing now can opt for MAID. And that was just a recent issue that was written about in the Toronto Sun. In the fall, MAID will be expanded again to those with mental illness. And those are youth age 12 will be expanded, and all those with mental health. Recently, the Department of Veteran Affairs was outraged because a soldier from Afghanistan with PTSD was offered MAID. He didn't ask for it, but it was pushed on him. And that is the fear. That is the issue. Will we have real palliative care, or will there be bullying? Will there be threats? And that is what happened to my family. And that is why I'm against this, because that creep, now that it is legal, and I will discuss that later, this happens. And so I don't believe, I think there's a misunderstanding. I wanted to address some of the things that were written in this community about this issue of us not passing this. I read all the letters, and I want to thank all the people for writing those letters to the Wellington Advertiser and approaching me. I can tell you that they were intense conversations. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of threatening postures. And it was really unfortunate because I gave 5 reasons why we should defer this, just have a discussion in our community about this. And everyone focused on my religious identity. Almost well over 60% of those were about your religious identity and whether you have the right to even speak in a council or represent or say anything. And that's what they wrote. You can go get them if you want to. They're on Facebook. And so what was bothersome and a little bit disturbing is that you would never, some of the letters wrote, like, you would never say that for an LGBT person, that they couldn't say anything. And so I think that we do need rational discussion, and I don't advocate bringing this MAID facility into our community. I agree 1,000%, million percent with Ms. Debbie Ostick's letter concerning the excellent 40-year service that Wellington Hospice has given to the community. And I would wholeheartedly welcome them if they presented a letter of support to build a facility. Dr. Simpson, when asked by myself, specifically declined any affiliation with Hospice Wellington and he offered no palliative care programs or understanding of meeting, philosophy, or palliative care in his public presentation. There was no indication that it would be like Hospice Wellington. He offered only that we needed MAID as for the reasons for not collaborating with them. It appears he has not even discussed anything with Wellington Hospice directly. It is just equivocation of the word hospice in the public mind that it would be like Wellington Hospice. And we need clarification from Dr. Simpson publicly before a letter can really be responsibly considered. The argument that euthanasia is the law and that the debate is over on MAID is fundamentally not true. The debate has just begun because MAID is expanding rapidly beyond palliative care and threatens access to palliative care and many other medical treatments, especially mental health care. MAID will be expanding in 2023 to be the most permissive in the world. Everyone on the waiting list can be offered MAID instead of suffering pain while waiting for treatment. I would like to remind this council and citizens of Centre Welling that slavery was once legal in the past. My grandparents died in a legal slave labor camp in Russia. To discriminate against and kill Jews in Nazi Germany was legal. Judges ruled on that, and it was the law. And the law to take Indigenous children away from their children and put them in residential schools in Canada was legal. Something being legal doesn't make it morally correct or right, and therefore it can be challenged at any time by any citizen. History has shown repeatedly that laws can be morally wrong. The argument for freedom of choice as a right misunderstands that preference is different from moral choice. Moral choices are not like consumer choices between one product, a thing, and another. Human persons are not possessions or things. It is confusion of license and freedom. License is the choice with only reference to the self and objects, or humans treated as objects, things. and not the other person as profound human. It is dehumanizing. Moral choices have two dimensions, the subjective intent and the moral act. And it doesn't matter how sincere or good intention or how much you feel it's right if the objective act is morally not good. Feelings are not the determining factor if an objective act is wrong. It does not matter if 99.9% of the people think killing is okay. It is always wrong. The greatest Enlightenment philosopher, Immanuel Kant, stated so in a categorical imperative regarding goodwill. If it cannot be universalized, then it is morally wrong. So if you want to kill people, you're saying that you can do that, if you can do that universally, it can't be good. And that's the problem. MAID and palliative care do not mix well because they are fundamentally different in their kind and views of human life. MAID will diminish any facility that offers palliative care. It is naively optimistic in our current Canadian and Ontario healthcare system to believe otherwise, because the focus of the past 30 years is to do more with less, cut services in our healthcare system. Our medical system thinks of us as medical units and costs. It is totally structured that way. Please read this book, When Politics Comes Before Patients, by Canadian doctor Sean Waitley. It explains the whole issue. Our declining Ontario healthcare system ranks near the bottom in the G7 and G20 industrial countries in the world. And we have become world famous as the absolute worst country in the first world and developed countries for waiting lists. And the choice for MAID that our government is making and expanding is to correct that situation. And I don't want that facility in our community. I will explain the basic monetary terms why MAID is the antithesis of palliative care financially. The New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet, which is a British medical journal, which is peer-reviewed studies, determined that 60% of your lifetime expenses are in the last 6 months of your life. The 2016 British Journal of Cancer, in the 2014 Australian study, was more detailed and determined that the 60% for the last 6 months of care, but also 40% of the medical expenses would be in the last month of your life, and labor-intensive care would be 40% of that 40%. In the British Journal Spectator article, Why is Canada Euthanizing Their Poor, on April 30th, 2022, quoting the Canadian Parliamentary Budget Officer, published the cost savings that would be $86.9 million for the original C-14 MAID legislation affecting palliative care. And with its expansion with C7, which bypassed all the doctor-approved and widened out the scope, and not having 3 doctors or ever, it was save another $62 million. MAID is about saving money, not providing palliative or medical care. Assisted suicide only costs $2,327 compared to what the last month would be 40% of the medical expenses of your lifetime expenses. In that article, it explained how MAID is becoming a killing machine for the poor, the suffering, the vulnerable at the end of life, because, well, it's free and it's called care. I am totally, unequivocally for good palliative care. Modern good care eliminates 100% of physical pain. Canada only offers 30% Canadian access to palliative care, and 56 of those choose MAID because they got poor service, like my dad and sister. Probably were endlessly badgered and intimidated, like my family was. And that's what our future is unless there's legislation to counter this. Because MAID saves money. Will MAID be offered for waiting list suffering? Will massive increase of depressed and lonely people, due to COVID be offered MAID? Will patients in hospitals offer diminished services or be afraid of MAID because they don't want it, but they want to have palliative care, but there's a cost. It's labor intensive. And I think they will be badgered, and I think that all these others will be too. It's disingenuous to deceive the public about this caring. MAID is primarily about saving money. And the April 30th, 22 article in the British Journal Spectre clearly explains that MAID is discriminatory, inequitable. It targets the poor, the weak, the vulnerable, just like Nazis did before and during Second World War. I think that we should defeat this. We should ask Dr. Simpson to come to clarify what his palliative care is about. He's never explained it publicly, so people don't know. And just have an explanation on what he said. It's only clear that MAID is what he's offering. And I know that everyone says they had private conversations. I had private conversations too. But this is a public debate. And I can tell you that the conversations I had were not the most pleasant, but it still requires, because the slippery slope happens, and this is what this facility will be if we okay this. And I think that we are doing something that is basically wrong, and it will be extended. It is already being extended, and that will, for myself personally, I can't be part of a facility and okay anything like that. So because we couldn't do anything to adjust this request, I believe we should defeat it because I think that it is morally wrong. And I understand that there's some people that are running an election and they want, this is a divisive issue. So maybe they want to be on the good side of things. But this is wrong for our community. And I think it's like the data's there. It's going to be shown. And this battle, you will see, there will be a lot of backlash about MAID being extended. So that's what I want to say. I want a recorded vote on this one.
Comments from other councillors? Anything? I just had a couple comments because of just the nature of the motion. I just wanted to clarify a couple things. Firstly, one of the reasons that there wasn't fulsome discussion last time around was because councillors moved to defer and refer. So when you move to refer or defer and you get a seconder for that, there's no discussion allowed. So if you want discussion like this, don't move to a referral or a deferral, because that's what shut it down. So we only have one more council meeting, so it doesn't really help too much, but I just wanted to clarify because of the way the wording of the resolution was. So as far as the county goes, the county vice just signed a letter for support from the county for the hospice last week. So the county is fully supportive of this, so just letting you know and bringing that into the conversation. And they have dedicated 2 acres of land at Wellington Place to move ahead with this and to work collaboratively with Dr. Simpson and Dr. Gower and the whole group that they have. This is a ways out. There has to be a number of fundraising that has to happen and a lot of community consultation for them to talk to what services they're going to be providing out of this hospice in Wellington Place. So the county is 100% behind this. I fully support this. It's something that we absolutely need in this community. And I have no, this is something that I think is absolutely necessary. So I'm completely supportive of us moving ahead on this. Any final comments from councillors? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one final comment. I want to reiterate and affirm that as a town, as a committee or a council, we all know that cities and townships in Ontario do not deliver health care. And I say that only to point out that we've been drawn into a medical ethical discussion that we don't have jurisdiction on. And I think that's significant. The province of Ontario delivers health care. As I said earlier, there's widespread support for hospice in our community, and I think that's very important. I realize it's a sensitive and difficult subject for all of us, but we don't have jurisdiction on it, quite frankly. And and as I said earlier, MAID is legal in Canada, and it's a very, very tough and difficult decision, and I've tried to consider it very thoughtfully, and I'm in favor of having a letter of support.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried, and I'll let our clerk do the recorded vote.
Councillor Van Leeuwen,
Opposed.
Councillor Foster,
In favor?
Councillor McElwain,
In favor.
Councillor McCrae,
In favor?
Councillor Kittredge,
No.
Councillor Dunsmore,
In favor.
and Mayor Linton.
In favor.
Just carried.
Okay. Confirmatory bylaw, I have a recommendation that bylaw 2022-68 to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held August 22nd, 2022 be introduced the first, second, and third time and passed in open council. Moved by Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McCrae. All in favor? That's carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Kittredge, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And we're adjourned at 3:31. Have a good rest of the afternoon.